Elisa, my goodness. I just want to say thank you so much out the gate for being an amazing mama, for being an amazing doctor, for literally just being out there and supporting so many moms on their journey with their children. You have been such just a beautiful resource for me. I am so grateful to have you in my life. And I'm so excited that this book is coming out, which I have literally right here. So if anyone's on YouTube, this is your beautiful book. Obviously it's behind you as well. I am so in love because I don't know about everyone else listening right now, whether you're a grandmother or you're a mama or you're an auntie, but at least for me, my son's resilience is everything. That's my come through. As I was making breakfast and lunch today, okay, I'm like, okay, as I'm cycling probiotics, as I'm managing mold in my house right now, it is his resilience that matters the most to me. And so this book is, I cannot tell you how grateful I am to have like what I consider to be the Bible of integrative pediatrics for our children in my home. And I'm really hoping that everybody else gets this book too, because we're going to kick off this conversation with you kind of, not going dark. We're not going to go super dark, but I do want to paint the picture of the reality. Because you and I grew up, years ago. I'm a 1979 baby.
I'm a 1970 baby. So yeah,
it was a different time.
Yeah.
The way we parented was a different time. If you want to call it parenting, I don't know what it was back then. There weren't car seats. There weren't even seatbelts. You know what I'm saying? Like you could just run off and maybe you came home. I don't know. But a very different time. Obviously, the advent of fast food was just coming onto the market around that time.
I mean, the microwave right? I mean, I totally remember our first microwave.
I remember, I mean, I was eating little McDonald's burgers at like 3 years old. Like that's how, that's just kind of what we thought was okay. Yep. But even then there were not sick children in my school. And I don't know if there were, not that I knew of that, but occasionally I had a friend that was type 1 diabetic, but overall I really didn't see a lot of that growing up. And now today it is a whole different playing field. And so can you share a little bit about the stats that just totally terrify me?
Yeah. And it's true. We don't want to, we want to know the stats. And when we know the stats, they can instill some fear, some concern for sure. Right. But then we just want to know that. And then we want to think, what can we do about it? Because that's why I wrote the book. I would not have written the book if there was nothing we could do. And there's so much we can do. So, let's take diabetes, right? Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune phenomenon, but now we know that there are more and more children being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And, when I was in medical school, when I was in residency, so I finished my residency in 2000. It's not that long ago.
24 years ago.
Children were not getting type 2 diabetes. In fact, it was called adult onset diabetes. Right, because it didn't happen to kids. And now, left and right, you see so many children with pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes. And in my practice, I'm seeing kids who are fit and slim and, don't look the picture of diabetes, and yet they're developing pre-diabetes, right, because of our modern lifestyles. And then when you look at the other numbers, the CDC at the moment, their current statistics are that around nearly 1 in 2 kids, so 40%, the number seems to be climbing, of kids have some sort of a chronic diagnosis. Something going on, right? That means, every other kid you see, something could be going on with them, whether it's, the 1 in 5 kids who have eczema, or the 1 in 10 kids who has asthma or ADHD, or, the 1 in 13 kids who are projected out of autoimmunity. And this is something, for parents, a lot of, mamas and grandparents, grandmas following you, they're doing so because they have a chronic health concern. They have something, right? Hormonal imbalance, PCOS, perimenopausal issues, blood sugar, insulin resistance, right? That's a huge thing. But the foundations get set for all of that when you're young. And so this is where if, Hashimoto's, right? If we want to move the needle on kids' health, we can't wait till they actually get a diagnosis. Or maybe they have a diagnosis, but, one diagnosis often leads to the next and the next and the next. So if we do something now to stop the cycle, we can help our kids thrive. We can help our grandkids thrive. It goes on and on. That transgenerational effect is huge.
I'm just sitting with it. Yeah, I know that a third of our teenagers have prediabetes. I know that so many children are struggling with mood challenges and behavioral challenges and just so much that that we just weren't contending with, just a couple decades ago.
Yeah.
And that puts me, I'm not going to lie, as a mom, as a mom with Hajis, as a mom who's had gut issues and trauma,
Yeah.
even before I was pregnant with my son, the level of vigilance I had in preparing to have him, knowing that I had all these conditions, it's an everyday intention for me.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful. Honestly, there are days where I don't know what I would do without a resource like you, because it can feel so scary. You got the new research with microplastics, the research around PFAS and forever chemicals and sparkling waters that our kids are, we think sparkling waters are okay, or organic berries. I have a friend of mine whose parents and in-laws won't buy organic berries, and it just terrifies her.
I know. Well, here's the thing too, right? Because, if you're on social media, or just who reads a paper now, but on your news feed, right? You see all the doom and gloom of, oh my gosh, there's forever chemicals in pretty much everything, no matter how we live, right?
In your Lululemons.
In your Lululemons, right? And I just read an article that said that, of course, we want to eat our cruciferous vegetables because that helps us detoxify, right? Our broccoli and our cauliflower helps glutathione. And yet, when the soil is contaminated with forever chemicals, guess which vegetables absorb them the most? It's broccoli and cauliflower. Yeah. And I say this because there's a lot of fear that you can read, right? And there's a lot of don't do this, don't buy that, don't eat this. But what there's not enough of is do this, right? Like do this to set the foundations to help your kids thrive, help your families thrive. And so, we want to switch that. And instead of constantly thinking about what do I have to run away from? What do I have to be afraid of? Let's think about, what? All right, I'm going to do what I can to minimize those. Some things are out of my control because there are forever chemicals everywhere, right? So how do we minimize those? And how do we be proactive so that no matter what our kids are exposed to or what we're exposed to, our immune systems, our brains, our microbiome, all of that can kind of bounce right back. And I have a lot of kids who they have family histories, like everyone in the family has Hashimoto's or everyone in the family has anxiety, right? And they see, all right, by the time kids are 18, 1 in 2 is going to be diagnosed with a mental health disorder, right? And here they're thinking, okay, everyone in my family has anxiety or depression or ADHD or whatever it is. And of course I'm going to get it, right? It's in my genes. And so I want parents and kids to understand, sure, it could be in your genes, and that might say that you have a higher risk, but in your genes doesn't mean you're going to get it. Our genetic destiny is never set in stone. And so that's where if we take that proactive approach, we can say, all right, I know this is what I'm at risk for, but here are the things I can do to make sure that that risk is so small that, chances are it's not going to happen.
I love that. Well, let's get into that. And then really before we get into, I think everyone, I really appreciate the quick overview on the stats and just kind of understanding. I just want to paint the picture of the bigness of it and why it is so important, that it's not enough to pretend like it's not happening, that we need to be proactive. And then, obviously not everyone's, not everyone has access to an integrative practitioner, there's a pediatrician, so, and so the first question I actually want to ask is, Dr. Elisa, do you recommend, when it comes to the microbiome, and this is what we're going to be talking about today and how it's the epicenter of everything, that and nervous system regulation, I think that those are the big pieces, and being outside. Yes. I think that's another piece, and it's so important. That's right. Lots of hugs and kisses, all those things, right? But in terms of the microbiome, do you recommend that children as young as maybe toddler or preschool age, that we're looking and we're maybe testing their microbiome, or just getting a sense of things out the gate? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So yes, we're going to dive into why the microbiome is really the foundation. When we take a microbiome centric approach to your kids' health, so many things fall into place because of the ripple effects of your child's gut brain connection, gut immune system connections, gut hormone connections. And so if we understand at baseline what your child's microbiome looks like, it can be actually very, very helpful, especially if, I think in two scenarios, especially helpful, if there's some signs that maybe something's not quite right,
Right.
right? And I don't mean like full-blown major something's wrong. I mean, then absolutely we want to look at your child's microbiome. But even if they're a baby and they have a few little rough eczema
Like little
patches,
patches, like little rough eczema, maybe some
yeah,
bumps,
like,
just something that didn't seem right.
or maybe when they have a cold, and cough, they're like wheezing just a little bit. So they're not diagnosed with asthma. They're not diagnosed with eczema just yet, but that's their immune system, their skin, their lungs, or whatever, saying, you know what, like something's going on. And chances are it's starting in the gut microbiome. And so if we can catch it really early on, that's great. Now, the other scenario might be, if there is a very strong genetic history, right? If there is, a really strong family history where everyone has eczema, asthma, allergies, hay fever, whatever it is, right? Or really strong family history of autoimmunity. Well, knowing that your babies or your toddlers or your teenagers' gut microbiome is really holding that key to whether they like flip over or not into autoimmunity, that can be such a great opportunity to look and see, well, what is their microbiome like? Do they have organisms that shouldn't be there that might increase the risk for autoimmunity? Is there inflammation that is not causing terrible tummy aches, but is causing an imbalance in what's going on in their brains or their immune system? So I think it can be very helpful. If there's, if your child is a quote, well child, it can still be helpful. But no matter what is going on with your kids, that's where we start with the foundations of how to create that microbiome resilience so that we can have that resilient child.
And what testing would you recommend? Is any of it available to us, or would we absolutely need to see somebody to get testing?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. There are some tests that are really only available through practitioners, and those are more comprehensive looks at. Well, let me just back up a little bit and say, there are some stool tests you can get through like a conventional Quest laboratory or hospital lab, but that's not the kind of test that we're really looking for, right? Those poop tests, the stool tests, are essentially looking at, if your child has like massive diarrhea for like 2 weeks or maybe some blood in their stool, then we're sending off a stool culture or even a what's called a PCR test, right? To see are there high levels of any really quote bad bacteria? Okay. So that can be helpful. But when we're looking at the microbiome, we want to look at there's, over 100 trillion, bacteria, microbiome, microbial organisms, including bacteria in your child's gut microbiome. So we don't just want to know, is there a lot of one really bad thing? We want to know what's the composition, what's the ecosystem, how much of the good stuff is in there, how much of the not such good stuff, what's the balance like? And that you can only get through a functional stool analysis. Now, some of the tests, I'm going to, have just full disclosure. I'm on the medical advisory board for a lab testing company called Tiny Health. And I really am so honored to be a part of that because they are really the only microbiome testing company right now that is doing the research, collecting the data, and has specific information for the infant and toddler microbiome for kids under about 3 years of age. Because infant to about 3 years of age, 3.5 years of age, their microbiomes look very different than older kids and adult microbiomes. By the time you hit about 3.5 years of age, then your microbiome takes on an adult-like pattern. And so you can use the Genova or the doctor's data or the other stool test. But that's where I use the Tiny House for the younger ones. Now, they have a microbiome test that you can use that is just looking at the organisms in there. If we want to take a look at inflammation, absorption, other kind of functional markers, then we want to do their pro practitioner test. So you do need a practitioner for that. I am hearing in the pipeline that Rupa Health will be offering some testing, so that might be an option too.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, I thank you. I appreciate that. That's what I'm actually planning on ordering, a microbiome panel for Kingston, just because I want to see, we've noticed just some food sensitivities and some things. And obviously, like I said, mama's got some stuff going on already. No matter how hard I've worked, I just want to just know, especially with the mold stuff that we're dealing with. And so that's something I'm going to be looking into. But I just wanted to just share, because I know so many parents just want more knowledge about what's going on with their children's bodies and their microbiome, being that's the case. So now I want to step into, because I know know some people really would love testing too, but I want to go into talking about testing or not. Right.
Yep.
Especially like if I'm working with a woman with estrogen dominance, I know how to clear estrogen metabolism without necessarily looking at all of the estrogen pathways of a Dutch test. If they say, hey, I don't have the $500 to spend, do you still have a way of clearing up estrogen metabolism in the gut and the liver? I'm like, yes, I can. So I want to talk about that as well. What are some things? And obviously, this starts as early as possible. I do want to speak into antibiotics in just a little bit too.
Yep.
Cross our fingers. We have not. None of that's happened.
I mean,
at all.
Yep.
And so, but I would love to speak into, that piece, because I know for so many families and children that has happened to them. Antibiotics happened to be on the table, whether a parent was educated well enough or not, like if it was absolutely necessary or not. Here we are. They did a full dose of antibiotics. But I want to talk about the everyday things that we can focus on. Although I will say, I know we're getting into food specifically, but one thing my Kingston said the other day, we were just talking about food and healing, with a future brain. And we talked about how it makes us big and strong and, he's getting, he's almost 3.5. He's getting smarter, and he's getting, and he'll just name off, like we were just talking about foods that are just life-giving for our bodies. He had a moment where he's like, well, my favorite foods are treats. In case you wanted to know where I landed on it.
Well, here's the thing that's fascinating. I mean, kids, even at 2-3 years of age, when we talk to them about all the like trillions of tiny little friends in their tummies and how they help us be strong and, healthy and happy. And if we keep them healthy and happy, they take care of us and keep us healthy and happy. And then you modify that language when they get older, right? Because, older kids and teenagers can really dive more into the science behind it. But it takes that, like, what are we eating? How are we nurturing ourselves to a different level? It takes it to, well, how am I nurturing this, ecosystem, my microbiome inside me so that they can keep me healthy and happy? I mean, as moms know, it can be so much easier to take care of someone else than us, right? And so if we know, what, we are taking care of, my tiny little friends so that they can help me. And so then it makes it a little easier to think about those microbiome nourishing foods, or on the flip side, the foods that maybe aren't as nourishing for our microbiome. And I also love that you said, no matter whether you've done the testing, right? There's so many things that we can do. And I will say, even if you've done the testing, you still have to get back to the foundations, right? Just like when you're working with your estrogen dominant woman, you can't just, go back to eating and living in the same way that got you there in the first place, right? And same thing, if your microbiome is disrupted, or you suspect that it is, it's not just about, so many people just want to go after the bad bugs, right? This is a very Western way of thinking. Let's kill the candida. Let's get rid of all the bad stuff that's in your gut. Well, if you haven't laid that foundation, if you don't get back to the basics, you're not going to grow a beautiful garden of probiotics and beneficial organisms back, right? The same thing is going to happen. So it still comes down to the basics.
That totally makes sense. So would nutrition be the place that you would start?
So that's a great question. It would be a place where I would start, but it's not a place where everyone would necessarily start. That's why in the book I talk about the 5 things for microbiome magic, because these are 5 things that your kids are doing every single day already. But if we learn how to do them in a way that really nourishes their microbiome and kind of creates microbiome magic, we can start with every one of those. Right. So when we think about nourishing, we're thinking about what foods do we want to kind of get into our kids' diet. On the flip side, there are also some foods that we want to be aware of, like our ultra processed foods. What ingredients do we want to keep out? Same thing, the way we move or how we sleep, how well we're hydrated. And even as we practice engaging our vagus nerve, all of those things will improve our microbiome diversity and function. And in some cases, like let's take exercise or mindfulness, working on your vagus nerve. Those things have actually been shown to improve your microbiome diversity and functioning independent of what you're eating. So if you're sitting here thinking, well, my kids, it's a challenge to get like one bite of vegetable into them in a day. Okay, then don't start with your goal of, eating a huge salad full of, whatever fiber-filled, phytonutrient-filled foods. Start with maybe, a gratitude exercise, right?
Hmm.
Start with going on a family walk every day after dinner, right?
Yep.
Start with whatever is easiest for you.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. I'm almost embarrassed to share that my child is one of the toddlers who is like a vegetable that is a full body no. It's a full body stop. So we have to be so creative in sneaking them in, fruit all day. But yeah, a vegetable. I was like, how is this my kid? Like, so yeah, so that I would, as a parent, I mean, really creative about, we put frozen cauliflower in smoothies and, in greens, and we make all these sauces with veggies hidden in them. And, we're doing all these things, but yeah, it's definitely like trying to get my son to eat a vegetable. Like that is definitely not where I start,
Yes. Yeah.
in sure he's
Yeah.
not going to do it. I cannot tell you how many vegetables I pack for lunch that end up in the trash every single day.
Well, and then so it's interesting because what you're doing, Marisa, is something called flavor learning, right? And this is where eventually we want him to see what's going in his smoothies,
Yeah.
see what's going on in his soups, right? Because then, he has some of that flavor there. So if you pair a new flavor, like I have a friend who her kid wouldn't eat sauerkraut, as a lot of kids won't, right? And so, but sauerkraut, fermented foods are so good for you. So what she did was, what is a favorite food for many kids? It's ketchup, right? And so she put in just a little bit of kraut juice into the ketchup her kid was eating, and then gradually just a little bit more and more and more. So she was pairing a new flavor with a flavor that her kid already loved. And then eventually her daughter was like, I actually don't mind sauerkraut anymore. She didn't say she loved it at first, right? But she's like, yeah. And so now it's become a regular part of her diet, right? So it's really interesting how we can do
Yeah.
these things.
He doesn't mind any of that going into the smoothies. He helps me make them because I don't know if he knows what's really going on. Like I'm not voicing what is everything that's going. He's helping me put it in the smoothie, but I'm not saying,
Nice.
oh, this is the vegetable cauliflower. I'm just like, no, this is what goes into the smoothie. This is like, and
Yeah.
like I make these amazing protein chia seed, banana, isn't ridiculous, spinach pancakes. It's a whole lot of
Oh,
things going, and I make them from scratch, obviously. And he loves his green pancakes. He is about that life. And there's so much fiber in it and so much yummy protein in it and all that. And he just thinks it's amazing. And no syrup. It's just straight up the pancake as it is. And he just, and if it's not green, he doesn't want to mess with it. Like he doesn't want a regular pancake.
nice.
But
Okay.
like if I were to give him spinach, not in a pancake, but in real life, that's a whole different thing. So he cooks with me with those foods, but it's different when it's just like, broccoli and when he was a baby, that's all he ate was broccoli and all the spinach and all the things. And so it's really fascinating the journey that we're on to kind of integrate all these things, and him being involved in unpacking the grocery bags, helping to make the grocery list, helping to cook the food. But like, it better not be it's a vegetable by itself.
Well, and but what you're doing is perfect, right? Because as we involve our kids in the kitchen, teach them how to cook, have them involved as they're older, even in our grocery shopping lists. For parents who have kids who won't eat that vegetable, it can be so frustrating. But by doing all those things, the research has shown these kids are way more likely than when they're teenagers or young adults to choose vegetables with their meals, and also to cook vegetables with their meals for their own children. So, it's a journey, right? It's not like it's right now, right?
I mean, right now I'm cleaning up boy pee everywhere, and that's just where I'm in my journey. And so, one step at a, but obviously, and we're doing so many things. So obviously a lot of colors of the rainbow, rotating different like seasonal foods. Protein focused. I'm guessing lots of fiber is a big piece. Healthy fats like avocado. Thank gosh. I don't know if he would be my child if he didn't love avocado. That would be, I don't know. I'd have to like maybe give him away. So those kind of things we should be trying to, that's how I build my plate for him first. And then if it is a treat, and I know some people are going to roll their eyes at me, but I make everything from scratch. So, and it's, like the banana chocolate chip muffins, from scratch. They're paleo, gluten-free, dairy-free. And there's no added sugar except for a little bit of those mini chocolate chips I enjoy. But those are what are treats in my house. But again, that's an ancillary thing with the focus being as much fiber and protein and healthy fats as possible.
Yeah. And the fiber, all of those, the fiber and the colors, so the fiber and the phytonutrients, they all, the reason why they're so important is because they feed your microbiome, right? Because fiber, what's fascinating about fiber and phytonutrients, what are those? It's a color, right? Like the yellow of the turmeric. It's like, the
red of the
and the
bell
orange
pepper.
and the green. Yep, exactly. All of those colors have a different
blueberries, raspberries, like those.
But what's interesting is we don't actually, our human body doesn't really digest and absorb that fiber and even the phytonutrients, right? Like even let's say turmeric, right? It doesn't matter how bioavailable necessarily it is. It's our microbiome that uses the fiber and uses the phytonutrients to make these amazingly healthful compounds for ourselves. So again, we're feeding our microbiome and getting in that variety, and all of that, really, really counts. And when we think about, homemade from scratch, versus packaged foods, the thing that, one of the things that I teach kids and parents, and I think is really the most important thing we can learn as our kids get older and kind of head out into the world by themselves, is learning how to read food labels and doing it like a gut hero, right? That one thing, we said that one thing, and regulating your nervous system. Kids can learn how to do that, they'll have a different future, right?
That's amazing.
Guaranteed it, right? Because because not all packaged foods are terrible, right? I buy packaged foods, right?
I would say, I'm going to argue like, maybe my vulture, vigilant. I would say like, I want to argue that only 3% of what's in the store.
3%. So you have to know what to buy, right?
Yeah.
What I'm talking about is ultra processed packaged foods. Those are a no-go, but you have to learn how to identify them.
Yes,
right?
you do.
Like
all of us.
If you don't want to churn your own ice cream, which you can, it's not that hard to do, right? We've made ice cream with like a bag of rock salt and the cream.
Oh yeah, I remember. Right? Yeah.
But if you want to buy ice cream, well, then you got to know to look for one that has organic milk, everything, some sugar and fruit, right? That's it, right?
That's it.
But
no gums, no emulsifiers.
Anything that has a mono and diglycerides, you put it back, right? That is where, for my kids right now, I'm in a different stage. They're 12 and 14 and they're going out. They're going out with their friends. They're eating lunch together. Food is a very social thing. And so they're learning how to choose the drink that doesn't have the sucralose or the acesulfate potassium, right? They're learning how to choose the bag of chips that, great, I would love it if they didn't have the chips, but at least it's not the Takis with the MSG and the red dye 40, right? So, because that's the reality of like the Siete chips,
which Starbucks is now carrying,
Oh, don't get me started on Starbucks though.
Oh God, Starbucks is the worst. It's awful. It's killing our children. But Alex came home to me the other day. He's like, they have Siete chips there. And I'm like, I don't care
if
they have Siete chips there. I don't want you buying any chips. No, they're just kidding.
It's unfortunate because so this is the food industry, right? This is where the food industry has really, when I talk to kids about what do they want to do? They want to make their own decisions. They want to be independent, right? They want to be their own person, right? But when you realize, when I tell them, look, those mad food scientists in those packaged food industries and the psychologists that are really, figuring out what to put on the front of the label, you bet they're doing that so that you are not in control of your decision, right? Like every bite they're figuring out how to make it sweeter or saltier or fattier or get the perfect mouth feel so that your brain is like, I want more and more and more, right? And so, if you really want to make your own decisions, you got to make them without these ultra processed ingredients clouding your brain.
Yeah, I know that at some point they're gonna have to make those decisions, and us as adults too. And I think the thing that I've landed on, and mind you, some companies are okay, like Brad's Crackers or maybe even Hugh Crackers. I'm so mindful about all of this. I'm scrutinizing over all the label, but really what I've come to terms with is that, and I know that nobody wants to hear this, is that we have to cook. We got to cook everything, is what I've come to terms with. And if my Alex and I start in the kitchen, we're really lucky that we have our own business and all of that. But one of us is in the kitchen at 4:30 because we're making it from scratch. We're making French fries from scratch. We're making all of it. Okay, I am using siete tortillas. I'm not gonna lie. But most of the things that we are making are 100% from scratch. And I remember sitting him down. I'm just saying, this is the only way that I really know how to keep my family safe and healthy
Yeah.
is we have to do this. We get to do this. And that is just the commitment we've made. And it's a mini sacrifice in terms of our own time. But to me, the microbiome, the health and the longevity of my son, and even the quality of life for me as a woman, which 25% of our lives are spent with chronic diseases. And I'm headed in that zone. That is the thing that we decided is our come through for our family.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. I mean, with everything we do, I would say, food and our mind, right? Our mindset, those are going to be the two biggest drivers of your microbiome. They're going to be the two biggest drivers of how healthy your immune system stays or not, how inflamed you are, the road towards chronic health. And these two areas, right? The food that we're eating or feeding our kids, or the mindset that we're growing in ourselves and our kids, are often the things that we pay sometimes the least attention to, right? Because now, I mean, growing up in an immigrant household, I mean, my grandma, my mom was busy working as an OBGYN. And so she was able to, she prioritized coming in. I mean, her office was attached to our house. So she prioritized having dinner with us every single night. And we had home cooked Korean food every single day, right? But
Go
things
grandma.
have changed. Yeah, right. And
I love the grandmother effect, right?
know,
That
right?
in families that have that
Yes.
in place.
Yeah. And so, we want to understand the, I mean, it's the trickery, right? That we've been fooled, duped into thinking that food can be, the packaged foods and especially ultra processed foods can be, just as good. I mean, when we trace back the progression of chronic disease, I mean, it's really been since, the 1970s that we've seen this explosion, right? And what happened then, right? The packaged ultra processed food industry just skyrocketed. I mean, it was 1953 actually where Watson made their first quote TV dinner, right? It was on an aluminum tray that you could heat up in 15, 20 minutes. And I mean, for every mother who is busy, I mean, it sold like hotcakes because what did it promise? It promised just as good as home cooked meals in 15 minutes, right? And that set the stage then for, the microwave and our frozen meals and all of that to take over and really having us think, yeah, this is the way we should live, most of the time and be fine. And in fact, it's not the way we should live most of the time, right?
No. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I'm glad we're having this conversation because I think it's just a conversation that needs to be said. You know, us making dinner together, sitting together, being together, knowing the ingredients that are going in our food, I think that this just lays the foundation for such great health and vitality. And I want to talk about the other pieces too. I also wanted to ask, I know we're going to slightly talk about antibiotics. I know we're running out of time too, because I know our time frame, but I was curious about supplements and because obviously food is first. We want to get that from food as much as possible, nutrient dense foods. But we do, I mean, from pretty early age, we've had and obviously I'm on a massive supplement routine right now because of my mold and all the things that I'm dealing with. But my son has been on a little mini supplement routine since he was probably 2. And he loves it. He loves his probiotic. He does. He's
Funny.
about that life. And it's obviously like a whole food supplement, a probiotic. And I'm curious where you land on that in terms of what's healthy, what's appropriate.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, food first, and it would be awesome if, our kids got all of the vitamins and minerals and micronutrients they needed from food. Unfortunately, that's just not the reality. I mean, I would say even for children who are eating the most wide, variety of plants, fruits and vegetables and whole grains, if you can tolerate them, and getting enough protein in and healthy fats. But here's the thing. I mean, some people might have heard the saying that you would have to eat 8 oranges today to get all the nutrients from one orange that your grandma ate. I mean, that may not necessarily be exact, but it is true. Our food is way less nutrient dense, I mean, the nutrient levels per bite are going to be significantly less than what they used to be. And you kind of mirror that with, okay, fewer nutrients and higher toxic burden
Yeah.
than ever before, right? So we have this inflammatory burden and a need for even more nutrients, but it's a mismatch there, right? So even for kids with the widest palate, they typically need supplementation, and some kids need even more. Anything chronic going on, you're going to need some supplementation, at least to get you back into balance, and then maybe go down to bare minimum. But as a foundation, I think that we know that the nutrients that are very, very commonly either insufficient or outright deficient in children are going to be zinc, magnesium, iron, and your omega-3, fatty acids, your fish, and vitamin D, right? And that, I'm going to guess that's the same for adults. I mean, I do.
I was going to say,
Right.
those are the non-negotiables for my
Yeah,
perimenopausal
yeah.
women.
So, and I do testing on kids in my practice, because even for kids who are eating, let's say, a ton of zinc-rich foods, pumpkin seeds, chicken, animal proteins, some of them are really still so low in their zinc, right? And you can also, get a sense from, clinically, my book, I list a whole bunch of clinical clues, signs that you would suspect your kids might have these deficiencies, because, again, sometimes you may not have a doctor who is able to order the test for you. But, for zinc, if your kids are picky eaters or sensory, like can't stand loud sounds, or, the tags on their shirt, or, are
Bothering them. Yeah.
everything's bothering them, that's a sign your kids need more zinc. Right.
Yeah.
Same signs of magnesium deficiency as for adults. If they're constipated, have headaches, if they have muscle cramps,
Anxiousness, yes.
anxious, right?
Yeah.
All of that. So if you notice those in your kids, and they're following you, and they're like, oh, well, I'm taking magnesium for that, but your kids have the same symptoms, your kids probably need magnesium, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So typically I'll have kids take a multi of vitamin D, and a fish oil, and then, probiotics are kind of thrown into the mix, right?
Perfect. Yeah. Yep, that's what we're doing. And, the one thing I will say is Kingston loves salmon, loves it. We do it twice a week with leftovers, mostly for him. But then we have an omega to back up as well. And we have a liposomal vitamin D and vitamin C. We have,
Nice.
because of our protocol, we have him on a little bit of glutathione. And then he does Epsom salt baths every night too.
Yeah.
He calls them his salty baths.
So great. We should all have Epsom salt baths every night.
I agree. Okay, so I also want to move into movement. How important movement is. When I was a kid, I feel like that's all I did. I was moving.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a different, at least, well, not for my son he's at the park like 3 times a day, or he's at an outdoor preschool, and then he's at the park. He's at the park right now. And so that is very much built in. 2 things that are critical for me with my son is obviously sleep routine is locked and loaded, no light in his room, none. Hopefully he never falls out of bed, because he's not going nowhere to go. It's just too dark in there. Number 2 is reading to him during meals and talking. So he probably gets almost hour and a half of reading time a day, if not more. And then next is I want hours a day outside, hours.
Yeah.
And so where do you land on terms of the amount of outside sunshine and movement children should be getting?
I mean, so the main issue here is that kids are just not moving enough, and their movement has declined. I mean, especially through the pandemic. I mean, it's significant with the Zoom schooling, and we're out of that era, stage, thankfully.
Yes.
But really, it's more. When I think about getting kids to move, we want to take a look at what they're doing with their time, and the screens, right? The video games and the screens. When they're on their screens, I mean, same thing with us, you're probably not moving, right? And that's one of the biggest reasons for being totally sedentary, right? Back in the day when I was, starting in pediatrics, it was the Atari, video games and the TV, right? Now it's, on a different level, but it's still the same, right? So we have to think, when your kids are on their screens, what are they not doing? They're not moving. And that movement is so important. We know exercise can be just as effective, or maybe even more effective, than an SSRI antidepressant medication, right? For depression and anxiety. And even better is if you walk in nature. So getting outside, it's not a treadmill on the gym, right? It's outside in the sun. It's going to improve your vagus nerve function. We know it can improve your microbiome, and it can reduce your inflammation. I mean, if you could bottle up the health benefits of exercise and sleep, I mean, you would have the magic pill for just about anything in your life, right? But those are the two things that fall to the wayside for most of us. Most kids are chronically under exercised. Most kids are chronically underslept, right? And so, what is my goal? Kids should really move. I mean, it's not my goal, but really when you look at the AAP recommendations, they should be moving at least 1 hour a day. That's a minimum, right? 1 hour a day with their heart pounding, they're sweating. It's not just a leisurely stroll where you can have a normal conversation with your friends, right? Like my daughter, hanging out downtown, walking up and down, San Carlos with her friends. That doesn't count. I love that.
It counts a little.
It's
community. It's a little bit.
I mean, it counts. It does count, and it's moving.
It's
and
movement.
It's your step. It's your steps, and it's community. Because also having that
oxytocin
is so important. But when it comes to like your cardiovascular and even your microbiome, we want a little bit more, right? We want you to be huffing and puffing. And it doesn't have to be consecutive, right? Like when you look at Kingston, he probably has these spurts for 10 minutes, he's like running, right?
Oh, yeah.
He stops and eats a snack.
He's like a puppy. I mean, he's running circles.
Yeah.
So you can tell when little boys, they just need to be outside, it's like they're like little dogs.
So yeah, we want, to really count up like your walk to school. If you're like, briskly walking and, getting it going, and that's a 10, 15-minute walk, that counts. If you're a trampoline in your backyard and your kids are out there, for 20 minutes, that counts, right? If they go to soccer practice and for half of that, they're running drills, that counts. I mean, all counts. And so 1 hour is just a minimum. Right? You can have way more, but the other thing too, is our kids get older, middle school kids, high school kids are often thinking about, I want to be the best athlete possible. Well, guess what? You improve your microbiome, you are going to improve your athletic performance and recovery. So, I mean, all of those things, right? When they're younger, it's more about, okay, let's help your tiny little friend so that you can fall asleep easier. You don't have so many worries, right? And so, but as they get older, the skin, right? The acne, or the period cramps or athletic performance, right? And a more accurate goal shot or remembering their lines for their school play. I mean, all of that, if we can tie back to the health of their microbiome.
There's been so many practical tips here about teaching our children how to shop, how to read labels, getting them moving. The last thing really quickly before we finish up, and obviously, I want to just mention the book again, is I do want to speak into vagus nerve, regulation. And what does that look like? Obviously, more than ever, as you've mentioned in this show, and I know you've mentioned on social media, on Instagram, the devastating stats around mental illness that our children are experiencing. And I know our microbiome is a major player in that, and I know we've covered that. But in terms of regulation, what are some wonderful little tips that we can do to help our children, obviously as early as possible, but especially as they enter into the preteen and teen years?
Yeah. So, there are plenty of apps. There's something called tapping that kids can do. What I like to have kids and teenagers think about is, really doing what they're already doing. It's not an add on, it's just a how to. And so if we learn how to breathe in a way that engages our vagus nerve and do that multiple times a day, because every day we're getting these hits of sympathetic fight or flight that are activating us, and we're not getting our vagus nerve kicking in, our parasympathetic to say, hey, you got to calm down. So every day we need to practice how to breathe with our diaphragm. Imagine that balloon in your belly just slowly filling up with air while your shoulders and chest stay still as you inhale. And then as you exhale, the belly is deflating, shoulders not moving. If your kids can learn to do that, even in moments where I have a test, I don't know, or my friend just texted me something mean, I don't know what to do. In that moment, okay, stop, 10 belly breaths, engage your parasympathetic. You'll be able to engage that wherever you are, whenever you need it, instead of living in this like, okay, I'm late for school, and then I have a soccer game, and then my friend just says something mean, and oh my gosh, my parents are fighting, and on and on and on. And you just, at the end of the day, you're regulated up to here, right? Yeah. But if we can regulate every moment of the day, okay, I saw something really mean on social media, I feel terrible, right? All right, let me just regulate a little bit before I move on with the day, right? If we can learn how to do that, your kids will be so much more successful as teenagers, as, post high school, whatever they're doing, as young adults, as parents themselves, educating their own children. And their microbiomes are going to be so much healthier because, like I said, engaging your vagus nerve, improving your parasympathetic will improve your microbiome and keep it resilient, independent of what they're eating.
And do you believe that we should be modeling this ourselves?
My gosh, absolutely. I mean, just like you model everything for Kingston, right? I mean, this is the way that if our kids see us frazzled, yelling all the time, which I'm going to say, that is me on some days, right? Some days you just lose it, right? But if they know, they can see us saying, you know what? Okay, I made a mistake. I did not stop and regulate before I said that, right?
Yeah.
Now it's time. We can always have a do-over, right?
Totally. Always, always repair, always do-overs. I know I'm like you, I'm very efficient. And the one thing, my son, he's not on a schedule. Why should he be on a schedule? Life is good. Oh, like he doesn't have a timeline where he needs to be somewhere, even though he technically needs to be somewhere. And so I try really well to not rush him around while still somehow getting to preschool on time, but like,
Yeah.
So it's a fine balance. But I remember growing up, it was chaos. Skis were everywhere. No one knew where anything was. It was chaos. Every morning was an emergency when I was a little girl. And it was so deregulating for me, and I thought, gosh, I just never want my son to feel like that. I never want my son to feel like it's just chaos in the house and we're all just, and a quote that I always share by Louise Hayes is how you live your life is how you start your day. Yeah. And so I always remembered, but I know that it's our responsibility to model this for our children. And so I wanted to just share that too about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anytime I ask him to breathe when he's really deregulated, he is not, let me tell you, not interested. He is pissed. And so I will regulate for him. Yep. As an example. And so, I think this is what we get when we have a 3-year-old, but it's going to shift over time. So,
well, I mean, that's the beauty of the mother-child relationship. You co-regulate together.
Yes.
So
exactly.
even if your child is like, if you start regulating and you just lower that energy level, you regulate together. It's a beautiful thing, right? But if you're like, I said, no, we have to get out the door, right? We all have these moments. Everyone's like, woo, totally. Now you're up to there. So that co-regulation is so important.
Agreed. Yeah, I get down to his level always. Honestly, anytime he walks in the door, the first thing I do is drop to his level and I just celebrate that he's there. He's the best thing in the world. I want him to know that he's the only thing that matters. It's the best thing ever. But he's still, just being so young and I breastfed for so long, TTs are regulating. So he just sticks his hand on my shirt. And there we go. And he's regulated. He's like, where are they? Where are they? I need to regulate. Okay, so the book, it's coming out. It's literally coming out, I think, today. Yes. And you can get it on everywhere the books are sold. I'll have the link straight to your book bonus page. And honestly, I'm just going to have the link straight to Amazon too. So please go and grab it. This is a perfect gift for any mama, any grandma, anybody who has children in their lives. If you want resilient children, this is the book to own, to reference, to go back to put little paper marks on it. You know what I'm saying? Like highlighters, all of it. Maybe also gift them some highlighters so that they have the book and highlighters.
Great idea.
Anything else about it that we should mention real quick?
Well, so, in the back of the book, part 4 of the book is all about what to do when your kids are sick. Right. The top 25 acute conditions: fevers, runny nose, earache, sore throats, diarrhea, vomiting. I mean, you name it. And as an integrated pediatrician, how to approach that using homeopathy, essential oils, acupressure points, herbal medicines, diet and lifestyle. And most importantly, when to go to the doctor and how to know when antibiotics are needed. And if they are, how to restore your microbiome. So I think that's
y'all going to have to get the book in order to get the answer.
That's right. You just flip through. I mean, that's what you're going to want to bookmark, right? The fever. My kid has a fever. It's midnight. I don't want to go to the ER. Yes, just flip it open. You'll have everything you need.
I will tell you, you have literally been my biggest blessing, the first couple of years of Kingston life that I was able to, I'm just, how grateful am I to be able to text you. And he almost has never been to an allopathic doctor because we've had you and we've had your resources. And that alone is worth its weight in gold. That alone is worth its weight in gold because I think if anyone's been to the standard pediatric doctor, Oh goodness. And so it's just it is scary when you go there and all of a sudden there's medicines coming at you and you're just like,
Yeah.
I didn't want to do this. So this for that alone, please get the book. Thank you so much, honey, for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, love. I'll see you soon.